Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk.
Mr. Shapiro, you talked about white privilege. And just this week, I had a conversation with Rachel Lazar, who's done some work, a Jewish American woman who's done some work on this area, as well as having extensive conversations with Dr. Greg Parks of Wake Forest University, who's also talked quite a bit about critical race theory. And it's my understanding that white privilege is not telling individuals that they cannot speak, but it is a term for societal privilege that individuals have as a benefit of their white skin. And I don't think that, and I think universities would be remiss to then say that because you're white, you're not allowed to say anything that's critical of white people. I didn't know that white privilege actually went into that sphere. My understanding is it's just, and the issue is that white privilege makes people uncomfortable to talk about the societal privilege that they have.
Well, to me, what I say on campuses all the time is if you want to cite instances of racism that we can all find and fight together, that's something that I am more than willing to stand next to you and fight, because that's obviously stuff that we should fight together. But when you just say that there is a white privilege out there in the ether and that by dint of birth your skin color generates for you an advantage, what you're really saying to people is that your view is less valuable because you have not experienced what I've experienced. And that is an identity argument, that's a character argument, that's not a rational political argument that can actually be taken on in any way. It's more of a cudgel and a club than it is an attempt to open a discussion.
Well, I think it's a demonstrable evidence that through society's demographics that being white has societal privileges that being black does not. But
we can talk about how that manifests, because that's
I'm also interested in what you just said now, is that you would stand next to anyone who has this. So, Mr. Shapiro, my question to you is, for Ms. Dunston, the tying the noose around the campus and writing messages that target African-American young students, would you consider that hate speech, and then would you stand next to her and fight for her?
As I say, I would. This is the first I'm hearing about it, honestly. But
really,
yeah. But from hearing about it, maybe because it's local. I mean, I'm from LA. But in any case, I'm more than happy to stand alongside her and fight whatever group was responsible for this. Not only more than happy. I mean, you're talking about the alt-right. Again, I was the #1 target of anti-Semitic harassment from the alt-right last year. So I'm more than happy to do all that. And I think there's one more distinction that has to be made. When we talk about cases like Taylor's, they're horrific, and the administration is siding with Taylor. Okay, the administration is doing the right thing by Taylor, or trying to do the right thing by Taylor, as they should be. And I think that we need to make a distinction between cases where the administration is actively participating in the suppression of speech and cases in which the administration is trying to do the right thing in order to punish people for application of crime.
What's going on, patriots? You just saw that clip. Let that sink in for a second. A sitting lawmaker pushing the idea of white privilege as some invisible force floating in the ether, and then pressing Ben Shapiro on whether he would stand against actual racist acts on campus, as if that's even a question. Welcome back to Voice of Truth. If you're new here, this is the channel where we break down the headlines, cut through the political theater, and stand up for faith, freedom, and the Constitution. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. Smash that like button so this video gets out to more people. And I want you to comment below. Do you believe in the concept of white privilege as it's being taught today? Yes or no? Now let's talk about what we just watched. The Congresswoman framed white privilege as simply acknowledging societal advantages based on skin color. She insisted it's not about silencing anyone. It's just about recognizing demographics and systemic realities. That sounds calm. That sounds academic. But here's the problem. Once you say that someone's skin color automatically grants them moral or societal advantage, you're no longer judging individuals by their character. You're judging them by group identity. That is not equality. That is the opposite of what Dr. King fought for. Ben Shapiro made a crucial distinction in that exchange. He said if we're talking about concrete, provable instances of racism, threats, nooses, harassment, absolutely, we stand together and fight it. Every decent American agrees with that. Racism is evil. Targeting black students with noose imagery is disgusting and criminal. Full stop. But then he drew the line where it matters. When the argument shifts from this specific racist act is wrong to because you were born white, your perspective carries hidden privilege and therefore less moral weight, that's not a rational political argument anymore. That's identity politics. That's collectivism. That's saying guilt or advantage is inherited by birth. As a right-wing patriot, let me be crystal clear. America was founded on the principle of individual liberty. The Declaration of Independence doesn't say we are endowed with collective group traits. It says we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights. Individual rights. Not racial rights. Not group rights. Individual rights. The modern version of white privilege, as it's often taught, doesn't just highlight historical injustices. It subtly tells young Americans that their moral standing in a conversation is determined before they even open their mouths. That's why people bristle at it. Not because they're afraid of discussing history. Not because they deny past racism. But because they reject the idea that identity overrides argument. Notice something else in that clip. When the Congresswoman pivoted to the noose incident, it almost felt like a test. Would you stand next to her? Of course he would. Of course any decent person would. The right has been consistently clear. Actual hate crimes should be prosecuted. Real harassment should be punished. The Constitution protects speech, but it doesn't protect threats, vandalism, or violence. What the right pushes back against is when administrations use vague concepts like systemic privilege to justify speech codes, bias response teams, or punishing students for unpopular opinions. There's a huge difference between stopping a crime and policing thought. And here's something the mainstream media won't tell you. Conservatives have been targeted too. Shapiro pointed out he was one of the top targets of systematic harassment from the alt-right. That's right. The same movement that the left loves to tie to every conservative voice has attacked conservative Jews like him relentlessly. So when he says he'll stand against racist harassment, that's not hypothetical. He's lived it. This is the part that frustrates everyday Americans. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can condemn real racism. We can defend equal treatment under the law. And we can reject the idea that America is permanently divided into oppressors and oppressed based solely on race. If we're going to have an honest conversation about disparities, let's talk about economics, education systems, family structure, crime rates, policy failures in major cities. Let's talk about solutions. School choice, strong families, safe neighborhoods, equal enforcement of the law. That's how you lift people up. But telling a 19-year-old kid that because he's white he carries invisible societal advantages that define him, that doesn't unite the country. It breeds resentment. It makes dialogue harder, not easier. And here's the truth the political class doesn't like. Most Americans want fairness. They don't want racial guilt. They don't want racial favoritism. They want a system where the same rules apply to everyone. That's not radical. That's the American promise. So when you hear white privilege, ask yourself, is this being used as a tool for understanding specific policies? Or is it being used as a moral club to shut people up? Because once debate turns into your identity invalidates your opinion, free discourse is dead. We need to get back to a culture where ideas are debated on their merits, where racism is condemned clearly and consistently, where universities protect free speech instead of selectively enforcing it, and where we stop teaching young Americans that their primary identity is racial instead of national. That's my take. If you believe in individual liberty over identity politics, hit that like button. If you believe America's best days are still ahead because we can have hard conversations without tearing each other apart, subscribe to Voice of Truth. And drop a comment below. Do you think the concept of white privilege helps heal the country, or does it divide us further? Stay strong, stay free, and I'll see you in the next one.